Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com and powered by all the Mo pros out there. I'm your host, Michael Hartmann, joined by no one today, none of my co-hosts at least. But I am joined by a guest, and our guest this week is someone who's been on both sides of the fence, leading marketing operations teams and supporting demand gen as a marketer. Sarah Lane-Hawn is a fractional leader and consultant who helps organizations shape their go-to-market strategy and build operational infrastructure with intention. And today, she and I are going to be talking about how marketing ops professionals can step out of the ticket taking mindset and into a more strategic, human centered role. So, we're going to explore how to better understand the why behind requests, influence decisions, and align work with both business goals and personal growth. Ugh. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael. I am excited to be here. Ever since we started talking about kind of this topic, I've just been marinating even more on the gold mine that is marketing operations and just how companies can better utilize that. So I'm excited about this, not only for the marketing professionals themselves and how kind of they can take the reins of their career and their day-to-day tasks and turn that into strategic benefit, but also just companies as a whole. Like if they're growing their operations team, I have some clients right now who are starting their operations team for the first time. And so these are great conversations to be had at any stage of development of thinking, how can we make the most out of operations and not isolate them and not fall into the pitfalls that so many companies have.
Yeah, I've been I've been excited about this. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I know a lot of our listeners and people in the community often are lamenting how hard it is to get out of that ticket taking mode and to
Mhm.
be seen as more strategic. So when we start with you know your perspective on this and what's missing in many of the conversations that our marketing ops professionals have today, I know one of the things you said to me is that there's a lot of focus on tech and attribution, but not enough on, I think you called it this human centered strategy.
Mm.
So why don't you kind of talk through what do you mean by that, and like how maybe a little bit about how you think about it differently.
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces there. For one, it's the day-to-day actual workload. I think if you even look at job postings today and how we list out the responsibilities for a standard marketing ops person at any level of expertise, it's going to
Yeah,
be a lot about tech ownership. And that's true. Like, I'm not saying that's not a big priority of the things that we own. But what you don't see a lot of is the responsibilities to be a hub of information, to bring solutions to the forefront, to see how data informs strategies across departments. And those are things that I think we're uniquely situated to do. The human centered strategy is something that is really important to me from an operations mindset. And I think it's something that has helped me kind of branch out from just kind of the marketing team or the ops team that I'm sitting on at the time is because a lot of our work spans teams, right? Like we're
yes,
working on how do we hand off leads to the BDRs or how do we circle back to the sales team based on the marketing initiatives that people are engaging with. And so
right,
when I'm doing that, one of the paramount things that's important to me is how do I minimize friction for those team members. So not only how do I just hand them the right things and check the box and say, yep, it got there, but did that now take extra time out of their day? Does that new process now cause them more frustration than it does help? So even if the data is good, what is the human cost of doing it?
yeah,
And how can we make that as efficient as possible? Because at the end of the day, we're enablers, we're the helpers. We're here
yeah.
to make sure that people can do their job and have, the highest and best use of their time. And so kind of keeping that human centric piece to anything we're building so that it's not just stuck in the tech and the
Yeah,
theory, but like in our actual day-to-day lives, how does this influence us?
yeah. It's interesting because like for people who are listening only, like I'm sitting here nodding my head and smiling because that last bit reminds me. You know, I tell people all the time, one of the things I think a lot of marketing ops and marketing teams want is a view through into pipeline and impacts and all that. And so they go like, well, we need to go ask salespeople to do X, Y, or Z, right? Update their stuff and all that. And
Mhm.
I often in like what I always tell them like you need to think about how this is going to affect their ability to do the things that they actually get paid for, right? And if you're going to go ask them to do some extra work, or do something in addition that is going to like get in the way of that, you're probably not going to have much success.
Yep.
And I think that's a like, that's a specific example, but I think your point about like understanding that from other perspectives is a good thing to know. I'm curious though, in the human kind of the human side of it, there's obvious stuff that we talked about just then, right? Internal kind of component of it. Do you think there's also a component of it that should be external facing? So whether it's customers and prospects
Yep.
or partners or
Yeah.
agencies, like how do you
Yeah.
think about that part of it?
100%. I mean, I think that if we're focused on driving efficiency, which I think is a lot of our role in operations, then that efficiency also translates to the prospects and customers. And so, how people engage with our website, even if we're not the
Yeah,
owners of that, if we're the ones tasked with forms and integrations, then how do we set up forms in the cleanest way to be frictionless from a
right,
perspective, prospect view? How do we make sure that when we're putting in data that's going to be used by the sales team, and then further that gets handed off to the success team, that it doesn't get degraded over
right,
time, so that when you're talking to your customer success manager, you're not answering questions that you asked during the discovery call, right? Like,
sure.
how do we just make sure that some of that redundancy in their experience doesn't happen by making the operation side of things very clean?
Yeah, I mean, what I've experienced, I guess an example when I was responsible for some website stuff at a big tech semiconductor company, and we a lot of what we had built out on the site in terms of navigation was really centered around how we were organized, but not really around and how our products were organized internally, but not really around
Mm-hmm.
how customers thought about it.
Yep.
And so I found myself being initially one of the only voices going, but like just because it's easier for us, like why are we making it harder for our prospects and customers,
Yep.
right? So um, I'm a big fan of that too. So I think it's like that's to me that's what I think of like human centered is thinking about all of those stakeholders. So
Yes, absolutely.
so one of the things I mentioned in when we introduced you is that you've worked across in both like demand gen and general marketing roles as well as ops, and I'd be curious how that has shaped your approach in how you think about strategy, planning, and kind of doing that stakeholder management.
Yeah.
I know, like, I could give you an example. Like my experience, even though it was short lived, I was in sales for a long enough period of time to realize how bleeping hard that job is.
Yeah.
And it's really informed how I think about that now. So, but I'm curious about what yours is from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, my background's definitely weird. But I worked in tech for a long time, but I've worked in like CX from a strategy perspective. And so been on that part of the house. I've worked within the marketing teams and departments. And then I also did do some consultative sales, both on the front end and on the client success side. And so I've really bridged to kind of followed through the full life cycle of clients in
That's
different
great.
different places. And I do think that that created a lot of knowledge and empathy for for all of those different pieces and parts, right? So I do think that just kind of that human empathy is helpful and is part of the reason why I do care about reducing friction. But you talked about stakeholder management, and I think that has really just come from um, the practice of asking a lot of questions, and not being afraid to put myself out there and say, hey, I need 30 minutes with the director of sales, and just asking for that, and then making sure that that time is valuable for them as well, and
Yeah.
being able to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing happening from my perspective and point of view. But where are you running into friction points? What if I could solve it for you? And the next week would be monumental for the team. And then making sure that, like, your priorities and their priorities can kind of align somewhere so that there's a
Yeah.
win-win. And I found that the faster I can find those win-wins with my like senior leadership team members, the faster that then I had internal champions who were like, okay, this person is worth my time, is
Yes.
worth talking to,
Yeah.
because I know any conversation we have together is going to get something done and it's going to move the needle. And so that started really helping me have more kind of credibility within companies and be able to work more cross-functionally. And so that was really helpful. And then working within kind of the demand gen space, I think has been really good because you get more of a creative mindset
Yeah.
for a lot of things, and you start to understand how in the marketing world there's a lot of work done that isn't going to have great metrics that come out of it that point you in a very clear direction or have
Right.
causality tied to it. Like, it's just not how it works.
World's
um
filled with ambiguity, right?
there's so much that's like a psychological, adventure. So that was really helpful, because I think if I had just jumped right into ops and was just doing kind of data analysis, and
Mm-hmm.
setting things up from a logical place at all times, I wouldn't understand like why this isn't being used, why is this not being adopted.
Yeah.
But knowing now like what marketing actually needs to do their job successfully, to then it be a successful handoff to sales, to then that be a successful handoff to CX, I can prioritize so much better what
Yes.
initiatives a company is needing, because it's not based off of my own bias of, hey, this is how it should be. This is the right
Yes.
way to do it. Instead, it's, hey, this is just going to help. And we'll get to the right way of things along the way, but this will help you in the next month. So we're going to start there.
Yeah. I love that point about like it's not the way it should be, because I think there's a lot of people who go like they just don't get it. This is the way it should be, and there's a no matter what that is, right? There's some sort of cost associated with it, right? In terms of if like what affects the other teams and things like that. What I want to circle back on a couple of things you talked about, though. So I'm curious. First, you talked about going and setting time up with people and sort of proving your value and all that. One, and I highly recommend that to people, right, to get to understand what motivates those other people, what their priorities are. But also, I love that you said you found ways to try to help move the needle for them, right, as a
Mm-hmm.
part of that. What I'm wondering is if down the line, if that has paid off for you and being able to then push back or
Mm-hmm.
sort of have the conversation about you asked for this. I think this is more a different priority. Do you feel
Yeah.
like that kind of investing in that upfront gives you the opportunity to have to give the people the no without saying no, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me it's also a personality thing of figuring out how to navigate personalities of different people, and what's valuable to them, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the currency that we're working in the
Yeah,
professional space is respect and kind of benefit to each other. And so if I can earn your respect quickly by showing you that I value you and that I'm here to be a support to you, and then I can show my value by actually implementing something that does make your life easier, then I start to have some actual currency to work with.
yeah,
Um, and from a pushback perspective, I've always tried to frame things in a collaborative mindset. And so I can disagree with you 100%. It doesn't mean that I have to come in hot every time and be like, you're wrong. We need to do it this way. This is why you're wrong.
yeah,
So instead, being able to always frame it in a format of, okay, here's what I've seen. Here's some of the things that I think will lack. If we go that way, what if we did it this way?
yeah,
Um, would that be of benefit? Do you have any reason why that wouldn't be okay? Even if it did something a little extra that you didn't need,
right.
is it okay if we build it?
Or if
And
it was a step in the right direction, maybe not all that you needed or wanted.
mhm. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Is that good enough for now? So yeah, those conversations are a lot easier when the person is like they already know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
And so if they feel like your recommendation's founded on something, even if they can't fully follow it, and they don't feel like you're confrontational for no reason,
right.
but know that like if you have an opinion, it's based on something of importance.
Yeah,
I think that really helps.
yeah. I mean, one of the things I have literally said this to other stakeholders is just simply if they come with feedback, and it's easy to feel like it's a personal attack, even though it's not, right? Because there's
Hmm.
some ego tied up into what we do. And I always tell people, give me, like, I want your unvarnished feedback, suggestions, ideas, right? I want them all.
Yeah.
At the same time, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to move on everything at the speed at which you want. But the
Hmm.
reason I tell them I want it is because when I hear one person tell me about something, right, and the context around it, it may not seem like a priority. But if I'm listening to enough people, right, I may start hearing a similar pattern. It may not be exactly the same, but it's like the same. And then I'm going,
Yep.
oh, this is something we should go address. But if I come in hot or tell people they're wrong or whatever, right, that shuts down that line of communication,
Hmm.
and there's a missed opportunity at that point.
Yep,
So
absolutely. Well, and I always like to keep a wish list of stuff. And so when people do come out of left field with like, oh, we should really do this, and it's something super far-fetched and has nothing to do with anything that's a
right,
priority, being able to just go, cool, I'm going to put that down. It's not on the priority board for right now, but like, if this continues to be something that's happening in the next month or two, like let's circle back to it again,
yeah,
and like that way it's at least been heard. And I do think that having that has saved me from a lot of conversations,
yeah,
of having to like vet those requests right then and there, because if I
right,
did, it wouldn't have been a positive vetting for that
yeah.
person. So I do think that that does end up
Well,
helping.
and I think that's all some people. Sometimes that's all people want, is to know that they've been heard, right? As
Yeah.
trite as that sounds, but I think that's like, and sometimes people are saying something, they're coming up with an idea. It's not, I need this now, right? It is, I've got this idea. Can we think about it? And maybe it gets on there at some point. So I think that's an interesting, like, that by itself is really, like, just this ideas on how to handle those situations is something that people should be practicing and trying different things that feel comfortable with them, right?
Right.
Um, Now, the other part you talked about was your experience. You worked in, you said customer experience, but it sounded like, I don't like, is that like customer success, customer support, or was it
So
like customer experience from a
it
like a
was customer support for software,
uh
and
huh,
so it was, we were strategists was what we were called. And so it was very much understanding the tech, understanding the client's business, and then being able to connect the two, to help make them a sticky customer for us and help them
sure,
adopt the software. So very much still from an advisement perspective, but working really closely, with the sales team to onboard new clients, and working
yeah,
really closely then with the marketing team, on case studies and being the voice of the customer there. So, yeah, I think it was pretty standard, like customer
yeah.
success, but from like an enterprise perspective.
It's just the reason I ask is because as many people we talk to, right? I think a number of people come from other parts of marketing into
Hmm.
ops, or some have come from a sales or sales ops standpoint. I don't hear a lot of people talking about experience in that kind of role and how
Mm,
it incorporate. And I kind of think about that again, this human centered part. I think that would be really valuable to understand the impacts to customers and the onboarding process,
yep.
whatever it is that your company does as a new customer comes on board. Um, so I hadn't really thought about it. So that one was like eye opening. I'm
Yeah,
still sort of
I
marinating on
think
that one.
that's I think that's true from a company perspective too, like in reverse in terms of who pursues developing operations, as a team and as somebody that they invest in. I think a lot of times it comes from the sales department. Some of the time it comes from the marketing department. I personally have not seen it initiated from the CX department. And I would love to see that happen.
I would too.
And I would love to work with a company who their, director of client success is like, we need to focus on client success operations. Let's at least get a fractional person in here, because there is so much wonderful human focused data at the CX level. Like, you have actual information about the relationship of the brand with the human, and what is actually meaningful to them, and what makes them come back again. And if you're in like software, like what leads to product adoption, what leads to expansion. You have all of this information that's never, or shouldn't say never, infrequently
Yeah.
digestible in a way that it gets back into the go-to-market motion. Um, but if you could start there, like instead of ending there, I think you could have such a powerful operations
Yeah.
initiative going in the company.
Yeah. I mean, we had an episode not too long ago where we talked to somebody about that customer marketing, which I feel has been de-emphasized in many, many places, right?
Yeah.
In the pursuit of new logo acquisition, and yeah, even things like just the simple, like, what's that experience from being a prospect to a customer,
Mm-hmm.
um, it can set the tone for whether, like, if you've got a contract that has a limited life, right? That first initial experience is going to be huge in terms of the likelihood that they'll continue to be a customer, is like my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, for sure.
okay, so, like, kind of going back to the marketing ops folks a little bit, and this perception that, or at least this feeling that a lot of people in the space that I hear about talk about is feeling like order takers.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my own theories on why that is there, and we've kind of probably touched on some of them. But, like, why do you think that happens? Why do you think that people have that perception, and maybe others have perception about ops as well?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you what would you suggest for companies or marketing ops pros to get out of that and from being the default?
Yeah, so I think part of it is just lack of understanding from, executive leadership. And I think that's true of most kind of technical roles, right? They can only get into the weeds so much. Even if an executive was willing to just like shadow ops for a day, like I still don't know that they'd have a great concept of what it is we do, because every day is different. And so they're only going to be able to have so much of a concept of everything that's possible, right?
Right.
And so I think the default's always going to be, I have a need. Who do I need to go to answer that need? Oh, it's marketing ops. Great. Here's what I need. Please go do it. And because things get boiled down so much into that ask, it's very easy, especially when things are coming from the top, I think, for professionals to go, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, like
Yeah.
here I go. Here's what you asked for, right? And we want to provide it quickly. We want to provide, the win. And then we start getting stuck in that cycle. And so then it does become a ticket taking machine,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody has to break that pattern. And I don't know that for most companies, you're as an ops person are ever going to get to step in the door and be like, oh, this is great, we're involved in so much strategy. Like, we're not there yet, I don't think, as a professional group known for strategy yet, for that to be the norm. So instead, it's up to us to break out of that, and it's
Yeah.
up to executives and companies that want everything that ops can offer to be mindful of this as well, which is to make sure that your ops team has exposure to different departments, to make sure that they are included in discussions about how are we setting our annual KPIs and what do those look like for the company priorities, so that that can stay top of mind within all of the tickets. But then from an ops professional standpoint, I think it's also on us to
Mm-hmm.
sometimes slow things down. And so when we receive that ask, again, being bold enough to ask for 30 minutes. Say, listen, I really want to understand the background of this ask so that I can answer this the right way and we don't have to ever redo it.
Yeah.
And I think when you start talking about longevity of your work, executives tend to listen because they're like, oh, thank God someone
Or
cares about not
scalability,
breaking this.
repeatability. Yeah.
Right, right. All of those things, right? And so when you can phrase it in that way, they're going to take the time, or you can say, I need to talk to somebody who's the right person. It may not be the person who put in the ask.
Right.
But then you can start to unpack that a little bit more, figure out what it's tied to, take it offline, understand the problem. What's the problem we're actually trying to solve? Not the technical ask, but the
Right.
problem. Then we can come back with the solution, and it'll probably come in multiple phases, especially when you're starting to build that new rapport. Is okay, here's how I answered your immediate need that
Yeah.
you have, and then on top of it, I answered it in a way that lets me build X, Y, and Z next to answer the bigger company problem that was behind the problem that you noticed.
Right.
And that then starts to shed light on, okay, this is a strategic resource. They're not just thinking one layer deep. They're thinking 3 layers deep every time we have a conversation. They're doing things in a efficient way so that we're still getting stuff out the door and we're still able to adopt it quickly, but we're also planning for tomorrow. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is like taking that ownership to slow it down a little bit, think through more layers while still executing really
Yeah.
efficiently.
I mean, I think sometimes it's as simple as saying, like, yes, I can do this. Here's the other things that are going to be affected. So just so you know if this is a priority, but also if you go like, this is something I can do it relatively quickly, but it's not something I'll be able to do repeatedly if I do it quickly, right? It's to do
Mm,
it, to make it so that it's scalable and repeatable. It'll take more time. And asking like, is that good enough for you for
mhm.
now, right? Um, I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm
one.
one of the things that I've seen time and time again, with companies is failure around kind of their MQL process, and the
Hmm.
ask that comes into me could be as simple as, hey, we think our form routing might be broken. We want every submission on a form to get routed to a sales exec, right? I could take that at face value and run with it, right?
Hmm.
Give me 30 minutes. I'm going to go audit the forms, make sure they all flow into a workflow that round robins to sales execs. Done. I win in 30 minutes. Everybody moves on. Nobody thinks about it again. Instead, though, pausing and saying, okay, you say all, but we don't want to route junk. So I'm going to make sure that that gets filtered out. Also, we actually do have an ICP. So I'm going to put some qualification criteria checks in here and see who meets it and who doesn't. That's going to be
Hmm.
another layer of this process. Okay, we're saying that everybody that comes through a form is an MQL, but what about all the other ways that we're warming up leads? And why are none of those getting actually flagged to hand off to sales? Okay, let's
Right.
talk about how to do that, right? And so now you take one tiny little 30-minute task and you've turned it into an analysis of the actual solution for the company of
Right.
what should an MQL be, how do we define it, how do we actually qualify so that marketing metrics are of value and sales receives the highest quality leads from us, right? And so that kind of change from this is what I was asked, this is what I give,
Yeah.
to hold on, there's a lot more layers here that we're not addressing.
Right.
That's when that change has started to occur, where you've gone from just a tactile doer
Yes.
to a strategic leader.
Yeah. I think another example that I see a lot of, especially early stage people, struggle with is they're asked to generate a report. They generate a report. Maybe there's a chart, right? Maybe there's a table of data. It doesn't really matter what it is. And they just generate the report they were asked for. They turn it over,
Mm,
no analysis. No,
mm,
and on that report, there's something that if you like anybody looking at it who's not familiar with it in detail will go like, why is this number off, right? something's not right, right? Or it's doesn't follow the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, like before, like generate the report you think is the right one, but then you spend some time looking at it and
Mm-hmm.
trying to anticipate what kind of questions are people going to have just based on like patterns. Like it's not
Yep.
even that hard, right? You got a line of data, all of a sudden there's a spike or a dip, right? Or spike and then a dip. And people are going to naturally go like, what happened there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you should have done some of that already. Don't expect them to go look at it and then ask you again. Like do that ahead of time
Right.
and try to explain it. And if what the explanation is, oh, we found out that there was a change made in Salesforce to opportunity stages, like whatever it is, right? You can explain what it is, or you can explain, we saw this too. I've already begun investigating it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but this is what I'm doing. Like this is what I've uncovered
Right.
already or eliminated. That kind of thing will change the perception of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is especially true, I think, in our space because the quality of data in marketing and sales, especially in the B2B world, is just not good. I mean, like,
Mm.
there's just no two ways around it. And so it's easy for people when they see reports like that to discount the report because the data looks quote wrong. Right.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as something is misinterpreted, and seen then as wrong, no report is ever trusted again.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen that where you can lose all credibility in an instant, and it is hell to try to get any of that back. And so definitely being able to speak to, having done some analysis, I think before reporting things up is definitely an important thing, especially for our more junior level people. That's a good skill to learn. The other piece that I would say is anytime that you're working with dates with reporting, date ranges
Yes.
and relative dates,
Yes.
you not only need to be able to speak to what is showing on the report, but the back end data caveats of what's going on and how to interpret
Mm-hmm.
it and how to use it and what it means in regular human language.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times in reports now for things that are more advanced like that, I'll put on the dashboard explainer text beside it that says this is to be read in the following way, and like put it
Yes.
in sentence form, and highlight and asterisk and bold and underline the things that are odd that somebody wouldn't necessarily think it means, right? And you especially want to do that if something's going up the chain to be used in a board deck,
Right.
because oh man, I have definitely had people look over a report and go, "Oh my gosh, we're up 220%, with it." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 that is not what this says.
Right.
Please don't say that to our board." So, being very clear about what things actually mean is important, because at the end of the day, a chart's just a chart. You can
Yeah.
interpret it a lot of
Yeah.
different ways. So,
And
yeah, I think that's important.
people are more and more removed from that, won't understand the nuance and the context of what a particular report or a data point means, and so
Yes.
you should be providing that as much as you can as early as possible. Yeah, it's funny because I have had many times where I've had someone come to me like, this thing is broken, this thing is wrong, right? Lead flow is broken. Like, okay, this is like, that catches my attention, but like, don't go around saying that, please. I'm not saying there's not something that needs to be addressed or fixed or whatever, but let's talk about like, what do you mean when you say lead flow is broken? What do you mean, right? Talk me
Mm-hmm.
through. Kind of to your point, right? Send me all the, like the response was send me all the leads or send all the leads to the sales execs. You know, could there be something wrong? Yeah. Could it be fixed? Yeah. And maybe it's a temporary, like it's so I always like I truly try to avoid saying something's wrong, something's right, something's broken,
Mm-hmm.
because it's too broad. And if it gets, I've had multiple times with other execs in other departments, sales in particular, who I've heard through the grapevine have been saying things about that, and I will go and talk to them directly. You're like, first off, stop, right? If you think there's a problem, come talk to me. I again kind of go back to this, like I want your feedback, right? I'm not I am comfortable enough to be able to be told like, hey, your team's not doing what they need to be doing, or this thing is broke. Yeah, I perceive it as being broken or whatever. But come tell me. Don't start saying that broadly because it's not helping, right? And
Mm.
that's the kind of thing that actually gets under my skin a little bit. But I won't like I've gotten to the point where I just won't tolerate it. I just
Mm.
like come talk to me and we'll go figure it out.
Yeah, the figuring it out as a team, I think, is always key, especially when we want to move into that strategic realm, right? We want to stay ahead of things. There's always going to be things though that pop
Yeah,
up, and
sure.
so typically when I'm working across teams, that also, especially if it's introducing a new process, that's usually one of the first things that I'll say is like, here's the new process, here's what it's meant to do. So if you see X, Y, or Z happen, it's not meant to do that. So that's,
Right, right.
please tell me when those things happen, because you're on the front lines. You're the one that's going to see that. You're the one that has the context for it.
Yeah,
And I'm here to then support continually making this better. And that tends to give people kind of the open door just to ping me and say, hey, was this supposed to come through? Hey, was this supposed to be categorized this way? And sometimes it isn't because it's a weird exception to a rule. And sometimes it is. And it lets me have the opportunity then to further their training and say, yep, this is a weird one, but here's why that got
yeah,
bucketed in this way. Here's what I would do with it. Here's the next steps I would take. And so then you're also enabling them to succeed where they got stuck, right?
right.
And so always the helper is kind of my my personal way of tackling a lot of those things.
Yeah. I mean, my mantra is I want to be confident but humble.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, um, okay. So we've talked a lot about kind of what that looks like and why there might be. What do you like? What would you recommend for people who are listening? And, okay, that's great. I still feel like I'm an order taker. Like, how do I get myself out of that mode?
Yeah. So I used to earlier in my career volunteer to be a liaison to different teams or sub teams. And what that would mean was if they ever had questions for marketing or marketing ops, they knew me by name, they could come and chat with me. And then I would sit in on all of their stand ups. And that way I knew what was going on with that team. And if anything was pertinent to marketing, I'd, bring that information back. That was really helpful because, again, a lot of what we're talking about here is just professional currency. And so,
Yeah.
like, by being visible, by being connected to people, by listening and understanding how things connect, you're going to be able to have more insightful things to say. You're going to be able to build reports in a way that actually are usable by the team members and not
Yeah.
just great for monthly slide decks, right? And so, like, all of those things really add up to make a difference. And hopefully, you have good management who are going to see your potential. And as you start expressing interest and saying, hey, I fixed level one, here's level two and three that I think we should work on next for this, that could help in these ways, they're going to hopefully latch onto that and
Yeah.
start utilizing that energy. But I do think it comes from us. I don't think that it's, I mean, really ever in anyone's career path, good to wait for the invitation. Like, I think you just kind of have to put yourself out there and try to continue to be humble and helpful and look for opportunities to do more and learn more. And that curiosity will take a long path. But yeah, the practical ways that we talked about so far of like turning a ticket into a conversation,
Yeah.
getting things done still efficiently. Don't put the brakes on just so that you can have your conversation.
Right.
Still be efficient, but adding those layers then of, okay, this is how things are connecting. And I think also a lot of it, another tangible thing is like get outside of whatever the workspace is that you work within. So, like, if you're on a team that does work off of tickets,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be very easy for your mindset to continually stay in tickets because
Yep.
that's what you're looking at all day.
Yep.
So get yourself a notebook or start yourself a document somewhere where you're just keeping your own record of notes of things that you were curious about, of things that you see potential connections of later on, or
Yeah.
where you've seen that like sales and product use similar data points, but that are stored in a different way. Like, jot it down because you're
Yeah.
going to find opportunities later that pop up that you go, oh, that connects to this wish list item that I had in the back of my mind for wouldn't it be cool if we could do this thing?
Right.
And now 6 months later, there's an opportunity to bring it up. So that would be my other encouragement is
Okay.
don't lose your own good thoughts.
Well, and I think I've seen more lately, and I know because of a connection to the people who've worked in brain research that actually you mentioned writing it down in a notebook, like literally writing pen to paper, pencil to paper, whatever is your like that actually triggers different pathways in your brain that reinforce learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think actually that's like a really good, not only just get out of your ticketing system and into a different digital thing, like if you can actually write it down, right, you can always translate it to digital easily. But actually there's a place for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so it's this is going to sound really stupid. There's a movie, I don't even remember what it was, that I saw years and years ago, where there's somebody said was advising a child, right, who's struggling with in college or whatever. And, interested is interesting.
Mm.
And it's like for whatever that line stuck with me. But the point was, right, if you show it to your point, like don't wait for the invitation. Like if you show interest, right, um, people are going to reciprocate, and they're
Mm-hmm.
actually. I've very rarely seen where people go like, "Hey, if you ask for some of their time to learn more about what they're doing, what they care about, like for them to say no. They may
Yep.
say, "I'm busy now. Can we schedule some time?" But they're more than willing to share, especially
Mm-hmm.
if they see that you're sincere and that your goal is to try to make things better, more efficient, whatever for them. From them.
Yes.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So one of the things we talked about is where marketing ops should sit in an org chart, and kind of why there's differences of opinion there. And then, and maybe this is tied to it as well, but this idea, I think you said like building marketing ops for reporting versus building it for enablement, right?
Mm.
So maybe tie those two together a little bit.
Yeah. So when you're building for a report, we're often thinking again just in terms of the data and the numbers,
Yeah,
and trying to just summarize things and get it to look pretty and whereas when we're actually building for enablement, we're thinking again about that human centric
yeah,
process and how it's going to impact the day to day and what's the cost in time and energy and frustration
right,
that is being asked instead of just number of clicks, right? And
yeah,
so these are the types of things that I think are really important um, in order to branch into strategy. Is that we're not just answering the need and the root cause, but we're also thinking about how it's going to influence others. Because at the end of the day, the point you made earlier, you could build the best process in the world. If it doesn't get adopted because it's too frustrating for someone, then it doesn't matter that it was going to be more efficient because it's not anymore. And so it's really important that that adoption becomes kind of our priority. And you can either get adoption by forcing it
yeah,
and being like a stickler for the rules, or you can get adoption by being really caring about what people need and what makes their life easier in the day to day. And somewhere in between those two is usually a good balance.
yeah,
People are going to have to do some things they don't like to do.
yeah,
It's life. And at the same time, we don't have to make each other's lives miserable for no reason. And so we can try to be a little more caring in how we articulate our builds. But yeah, I think it does connect some to the debate from the last year of where where does marketing ops sit? What should we be called? Like all
Yeah.
of these conversations that we have kind of within our own community. And I think that one of the reasons why it's so difficult to answer is that there is this gold mine of information to be had in operations.
Hmm.
And I don't just say marketing ops because it could be sales ops, rev ops, go to market ops, whatever brand of
Yeah.
ops you want to be in. Um, but it's there's so much data that is cross-functional that goes across these different teams and departments that everyone's using, that everyone could be using, and the processes go across those departments and those tool sets as well. And so because of that, it's hard to place us, but that
Hmm.
also, I think, should be kind of a green flag for companies and leaders thinking about operations that, like, oh, if we can't easily say, well, you sit here because this is what you have access to and this is who you serve,
Yeah.
then it should say, wow, this is a hub of information. They will be able to see intersections of things that nobody else has insight into. And so when we're trying to problem solve at a company level, um, these are the people that we need to be tapping as our problem solvers because that's what they do every day.
Yeah.
And yes, we might put the blinders on and kind of stay in our lane sometimes, but we have the potential to be able to answer a lot of those intersectional needs
Yeah.
for a company. And so I don't have the answer for where we should sit. But I think that we should be working really closely. Like if a company has chief of staff roles, like I think
Hmm.
ops should be working hand in hand with
Agreed.
chief of staff roles because they are again tasked with the impossible problems for the company that are most important. And that is what we have insight into is here's all of the potential web of ways that things are connected that we can pull from to solve those problems.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up chief of staff because I think of them as sort of the classic generalists, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's true of a lot of ops roles, not just marketing and revenue ops and sales. Like, there's a lot of that, and it's kind of counter to the way that many organizations are built for around specialization. And so, it's that's I think that's part of why it's hard to sort of slot in. Where do these generalists that seem to have a little bit of a bent towards one functional area or another fit in to the
Yeah.
organization, right? Um, yeah, we actually have talked to people who are chiefs of staff, and I've often wondered if that would be a good, like, one of potential career paths for people
Hmm.
in ops roles. I think it's hard because in many companies, chief of staff is it's not a there are times when it's seen as a really important critical role and it's compensated in such a way, and then there's lots where it's not.
Hmm.
And I think that's the it can sometimes be like, and the perception is it a goal of a career path, or is it a part of a path and a career path? I think there's a lot of questions about that.
Sure.
So, well, we're getting short on time. Why don't we do like we end here a little bit? So one of the things that you and I talked about, and I have sort of strong opinions about too, and you kind of touched on it at one point when you said, like, when you're in demand gen, like, there are things that are not measurable, right? So it implies that there's a little bit of a gut kind of instinct on stuff. Like,
Hmm.
so I know there's a lot of push in business in general and marketing, like, to do data and data driven, decision making, or that. Um, but I think I still think there's a place for gut, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, how do you think about those two, and how would you balance that?
Yeah. So I feel like I have to preface this by saying that, like, my education is as a mathematician. I'm an extremely analytical person. I want a yes or no answer to
I am
everything.
too.
That's how my brain works. At the same time, what I've really learned over probably the past decade, and I wish I knew the source where I first heard this, where they said that your gut um, is data too. And it was
Mm,
coming from this idea of your intuition is founded off of patterns that you have stored sometimes subconsciously from exposure to things. And so the longer that you're in your career, the longer you're going to have exposed to seeing things over and over and over again happen to the point that somebody's going to say, hey, I really think we need to automate our entire prospecting sequence. And your gut is just going to go, no, I don't think we should.
right,
And it's not that you necessarily even have the data for that, but you've seen it so many times that something in you knows that that's not the right decision.
right,
And so then again, you advise off of actually, I think this would be better. This would be more holistic. We need to pair automation with personalization, with individual outreach and research, right? And and again, that recommendation is coming from your knowledge that
right.
you have, and so you are a data source. But I think a lot of us who are very analytical and are used to people asking us to, you know, pull reports within the next 2 hours that, you know, tell a certain narrative, it gets really easy to kind of have that like trigger to jump to prove something.
Yeah,
And that's not always the right answer. Sometimes we need to kind of just like sit in our intuition and trust our gut and be able to say, you know, here's what I'm thinking. Um, and especially if something isn't measurable, then it's really important to trust that intuition and that past experience that you've had. Um, and then you might measure forward, right? You might start monitoring the changes from then on to be able to see
right.
if you made the right call. But yeah, that I thought that was like really brilliant when I first heard it. That just that idea that like your experience
Your gut
is
is data.
data, like
Yeah,
you know that counts as a credible source.
I'm stealing that totally. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So it's funny because I also have. I didn't do math. I have an applied math minor, but I'm an engineer by training, and in
Mhm.
particular operations research, which is all about optimization and complex problems. And um, so, like, I really want to go there because it feels natural. At the same time, it's funny because like I think about I'm a big fan of the Freakonomics
Mhm.
franchise, right?
Yeah.
And I think what it opened up to me is like this whole my one of my oldest son is in a business school now, and we talked about economics, and it said like there's problems with the fundamentals of economics theory because it's based on people acting rationally and da da da, da, which is just not the case. And it's like what
Mm,
spawned behavioral economics
mm,
is because there's other things other than people acting in a rational way, and so
yeah.
I think, oh, like your point, like over the years, this is sort of like I've evolved and gone like what do I think is important to the point where last year when I wrote a white paper for the market apps community about measuring effectiveness of B2B marketing, one of the perspectives I talked about is narrative, right? There's a storytelling component that is not really data at all,
Mhm.
right? But it's looking at like when we win deals, what are the characteristics of example ones that we have that we can like point to? Like we won this
Yep.
deal with logo X. Here are all the things that happen across sales, marketing, customer experience, whatever,
Mhm.
that led to that, and how can we take that and feed it back into what we do when we go to market?
Mhm.
And it's often I think many marketers who should be really good at the storytelling don't do it very well internally,
Yeah.
and it's a missed
For sure.
opportunity in my book.
For sure.
Well, hey, Sarah, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. If folks want to keep up with what you're talking about, continue the conversation with you or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I always direct people to LinkedIn just because it's where I'm most active. So you can always find me there. Sarah Lane-Hawn, Lane-Hawn Consulting is my company. I also go by the hashtag MopsFairy. So I am very much whimsical, and that ended up kind of coming into my personal brand, which has been really fun this last year.
I love that.
But yeah, LinkedIn is honestly the best. I mean, I have a website and I'm on the HubSpot. Providers pages, but I don't have conversations those places, and I'd much rather have a human conversation. So LinkedIn is the place to find me.
Fantastic. Again, Sarah, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to do this. So appreciate that. Thanks always to our audience out there. As always, if you have suggestions for topics or guests, or you want to be a guest, please reach out to Naomi, Mike, or me. We'd be happy to do it. Till next time, bye everybody.